Hello everyone, welcome to the week 2 content. In this video, I just want to go over the expectations for this week so that we're all clear on what we need to be working on. And then I'm going to be diving into AutoCAD and showing you some of the commands that you need to complete the Lab 2 assignment. And then after I go over that, I'm going to be introducing our practical assignment that will be due at the end of the AutoCAD unit here in a few weeks. So basically, we're going to start it together, and I'm going to introduce it, and then each week we're going to add more and more pieces to it as we learn them. All right, so this week it's going to start out pretty basic, and it's going to be going over some of the drawing tools that we're going to be using to draw the actual floor plan of the assignment. All right. So we're going to start working on that together, and then I'm going to have you guys complete it and just stay caught up and on task so that by the time we get to the last week in our AutoCAD unit, you will be ready to complete that practical assignment and submit it for your grade. All right, so starting off, I just want to take a look at our schedule here. So technically we are on week 3. But this is going to be the week 2 content since the first week was a really short week of just 2 days. All right. So this is going to run from 9/7 to 9/13. But since Monday, 9/7 is Labor Day, I'm going to be extending the due date for the Lab 2 and Quiz 2 to actually the following Monday. Okay, so 9/14, it's going to be due at midnight on 9/14 instead of Sunday, 9/13. All right, so just make sure you're aware of that. You're going to have an extra day to work on it because of the holiday. All right, so this week we're going to go over some of the drawing tools more in depth. So I introduced this stuff in last week's content and just kind of gave you a broad overview of everything. And it took a long time to get through going over all that stuff. Hopefully this week's lecture is a little bit more concise so that you can get through it quicker. But basically, we're going to be going over these drawing tools and actually using them, and also some of the modify tools, okay? So at this point, you should have AutoCAD downloaded and installed on your computer. Hopefully you have the most recent version, but if you have an older version, that's totally fine. It's going to work just as well. All right. I didn't really receive many emails regarding issues with the verification process on Autodesk. So hopefully that's the case. Hopefully everyone was able to get through the verification process and get everything downloaded and installed. If you're still having issues with that, you need to get in contact with me right away so that we can get that sorted out and get it installed on your computer, because from this week onward it's going to be expected that you have that so that you can complete our assignments. Everything we're going to be doing is using AutoCAD from here on out until week 5. All right, so you really need to make sure that you get that taken care of and installed, or you're going to start falling behind. Okay. So yeah, that's basically it for our schedule this week. I'm going to hop over to the actual module folder in Blackboard to show you what's going on there. Okay, so this is what I mentioned in our course introduction. Every week from here on out, I'm going to be releasing a weekly live session poll. And what you need to do on this poll is indicate whether or not you want a live session. And if you do want a live session, enter any specific questions you have here and then click on submit. All right. You can do this multiple times if you have multiple questions, and I'll be able to see all the questions that you have asked, so that way I look on my end and figure out the answers so that I can come into the session prepared and know exactly what I need to cover. All right. This poll that I'm putting out is going to go live on Wednesdays. So whenever you open this at the start of the week, you're not going to see it until Wednesday. And the reason for that is because I want you to have time to look through the content for this week and make sure it makes sense to you. And then if it doesn't make sense, or if you have a question on something that you'd like covered in a live session, at that point, after you've had some exposure to what we're going over this week, you can then answer the poll. All right, so this is going to go live each Wednesday. Well, actually, each Tuesday at midnight. All right, so going forward, it'll be open all day Wednesday, all the way through the rest of the week. Okay, and then my live sessions that I'm going to be having, I'm going to be doing those on Thursdays. Okay, since that would be our normally scheduled class time anyway, you shouldn't have anything going on Thursdays at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. I know some of you are getting out of studio and having to run back to maybe your dorm rooms really quickly, so we can push that back to 6 o'clock if you would like. It really doesn't matter to me, just to give you guys more time and get more people in there. But if we do hold a live session for this week, or for any of the weeks, I'm going to be recording them. So if you can't make it back for whatever reason, but you wanted to listen to the live session, it's going to be posted on the Blackboard folder like any other thing that I do, so that you can always go back and see exactly what questions were asked and what we covered, okay? And the reason behind these polls and stuff is just for me to get a sense of how many people are struggling, and sort of get a head count of how many people want that live session and want help, okay? Filling it out is totally optional. I encourage you to. I would appreciate if you did, but it's not like this is for a grade or anything. So if you forget to, or if you just don't feel like it, it's not that big of a deal. It's really just for my purposes to gauge how many people are struggling and need help with the content. All right. Going on throughout this module, we have some LinkedIn tutorial videos here, just like last week, okay? So this week I have quite a few more of these than I did last week. I think last week I maybe had around 5 or 6 small videos. This week I have 2 parts. So this first part is going to go over the drawing tools in detail. And I know we covered these last week and it's sort of a review, but I just really like the way that they explain how to use these tools. They do it in a really good, detailed, and concise way. So I figured I would throw them in there so that we're just really clear on exactly how to use them. And then the second part is going to cover the modify tools again. All right. So these are tools like move and scale and copy, mirror, things like that. Let me open these up really quick. Hopefully on your end you're able to see these videos. If you're having issues accessing LinkedIn Learning, please let me know, because it's really important that you can, because I'm going to rely on LinkedIn Learning for some of like the quick smaller stuff that really doesn't make sense for me to cover when I can just link you to this because it's such a good resource and they explain it so well. So really if you can't access it, it's important that you tell me so we can figure that out. All right, but week 2, part 1, you can see we're going over some of these tools that we use in our drawing space. So like O-snaps, ortho, and polar tracking, how to draw lines, arcs, and circles, how to draw polylines, polygons, and splines, and then navigation using zoom and pan. So zoom and pan was something that I kind of glossed over and didn't really cover last week, which probably didn't matter to you because most of you probably weren't inside of AutoCAD yet. But as you start working, you're going to need to understand how you navigate around the workspace. Okay, that's really, really important. It's very basic, but it's very important that you understand how to do it because there's specific things that you have to hit on your mouse and keyboard to navigate efficiently within the drawing space in AutoCAD, all right? So make sure you watch this because I'm not really going to go over it, probably in as much detail as we jump in here. But keep in mind that I do have that keyboard and mouse overlay on my AutoCAD screen so that even if you do get confused or forget something, you can see exactly what I'm pressing on my keyboard and mouse at all times. So then you can just replicate that on your end, all right? Part 2 opening that up, there's a lot of videos in here. I'm sorry about that, but if you look, each one is pretty short. So getting through all of them, you'll be able to get through all of them maybe in an hour, hopefully. But I watched them and they're just really good, and they explain everything really well and in a lot of detail. And there's even some things in here, watching them, that, I didn't even know about, or I don't use on, very often when I'm working in AutoCAD, that I thought was really interesting and helpful. So make sure you watch all these videos, and then you really understand what he is doing and how he's explaining everything, because they're just really, really good explanations. All right? Okay, so then after that, we have our Lab 2 assignment. So for the Lab 2 assignment, what you're going to be doing is downloading this AutoCAD file right here. And then within the AutoCAD file, there's a set of exercises, and each exercise has its own set of instructions for how to complete it. Okay? So once you download this and open up the file, what you want to do is click on this, and like I said in my intro, technically these are going to be set up as quizzes, but that's just because it's the most efficient way on my end for grading, all right? And also it's easier for the submission process for you. All right, so you're going to click on this. All right, it's going to act like it's a test or a quiz or something, but just click begin, and you're going to have unlimited time to do this. Right now it says multiple attempts, but no, actually I'm leaving that open to multiple attempts in case you want to resubmit before the deadline. Okay, so if you did something and you realize that you messed it up, you can create a new submission, since this is technically an assignment, and as long as you get that new version submitted before the deadline, you can make those corrections, okay? But you can open this test and you can save it and close out of the tab and stuff and reopen it and resume it later if you want, all right? So we hit begin, and so this is what you're going to be doing. There are 8 questions in here because there's 8 exercises within the AutoCAD file I gave you, okay? And basically you're going to complete each exercise, and then you're going to take and you're going to upload a screenshot for each of these questions. Okay, so say I complete exercise 1, I get exercise 1 on my screen, I take a screenshot of it so I can see exactly what you did and that you completed the exercise correctly. You're just going to hit browse my computer, navigate to that image file, and then you're going to upload it. And you're going to do the same thing for each one of these questions, okay? And at the end you're just going to save and submit. And then on my end, I'll be able to see all those images and I'll just be able to look at them and grade you, okay? So it should be really simple. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense or if you're having problems with it, let me know and I can help you, all right? But now I'm going to jump into AutoCAD and I'm going to explain the exercises and get you started on them so that we understand what exactly we're supposed to be doing with those, all right? All right, guys, so here we are inside of that AutoCAD file that you're going to download for your Lab 2 assignment. So if you look here, these are 8 different exercises that you're going to have to complete for the week, all right? So each one, you can see, has a name associated with it. All right, copy, scale, mirror, rotate, extend, trim, fillet, offset, and polyline. Okay? So then inside of each one of these rectangles, we have our instructions for what we're supposed to do to complete the assignment. Okay? Once you complete these, what you want to do, the simplest way to do it, is get it filling your screen reasonably well. So something like this, so that I can see everything. I can see all the text and everything clearly, and I can see your work. This will be fine. And then I use Snipping Tool. I don't know how many of you have used that in the past, but if you go down here and you type in snipping tool, this little rectangle is going to come up, or this little dialog box. All you have to do then is click on new. Okay, your screen's going to white out, and you just want to create a window around whatever you want to show me. So if you click and hold and then drag around that and then release, there you go. That's what it's going to look like, and you just want to go to File and then Save As, and then find a place to put that. All right, just call that Exercise 1 Copy, something like that, so that you know what it is. And that's what you're going to be submitting to me in the assignment. All right. So hopefully that makes sense on how to submit. Really quickly, I'm going to run through these and just start them for you so that we understand what we need to be doing. Okay? So here we go. Here's the first one. Using the copy command, duplicate the square 4 times to the right and 3 times down with a space of 4 feet between each square. The square's dimensions are 4 feet by 4 feet. All right? So what we want to do in this one is start out by highlighting our square and then typing the move command. All right. Once we do that, we can establish a base point, and it really doesn't matter where we click because we're going to be using a fixed dimension for where to move this, okay? So if you want to click one of these corners or just out in space, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to click in this corner, and then I'm going to drag to the right, okay? And at this point is where we type in our actual dimension for how far we want to copy this. Oh, I'm in the move command. I need to hit copy. All right, so copy, not move. All right, so I'm going to click that corner again. And something to note down here, it's going to ask you what kind of mode you want. Make sure this says multiple. All right, so if it doesn't, you just want to click on either mode or M and select multiple, and that's going to let you do multiple copies without exiting the command and restarting the command. All right, so I'm going to click on my base point again. I'm going to start moving to the right, and we want a 4-foot space between each of these. Okay, so we basically have to do twice as big as the dimension of the rectangle or the square. All right, so if I want a 4-foot space, I have to move this 8 feet to the right because I'm moving from that top right corner where I set my base point. All right, hopefully that makes sense. But if I do 8 feet, 0 inches, okay, and hit enter, you can see that it copied it. And you can see now that that 4-foot square fits exactly between the two of those, okay? So you just want to do double whatever your width is, all right? Now notice as we continue to copy, we're going to be continuing from that first base point that we set up, okay? Not from this one. So now we need to double that again, okay? So instead of 8 feet, we're going to have to do 16 feet. Okay, so if I type 16 feet and hit enter, there you go. Now you can see that we did it there. So obviously it looks like 4 times is not going to fit inside of this rectangle. So I'm going to change that to 3 times. So we'll do a 3 by 3 instead of a 4 by 3. Okay, so then once you have this, it's just the same thing, except you want to highlight all of these at the same time and then copy. Okay, so then you're going to move it down, and here you would do 8 feet again. Okay, and then you would just do that one more time to get your 3 by 3 grid. Okay. So that's it for the copy one. All right, for the scale one, I'm going to have you guys scale this square up so that it falls on these dashed lines here and these dashed lines here, okay? So basically what you're looking for is something at the end that looks like this. We're going to preserve the original square, and then we're going to scale it up and then keep this one here and scale it up and keep the largest one here as well. So it'll just look like this at the end. All right, but to start you guys off on that, I'm going to talk about some of the methods we have for scaling. Okay, so first we want to click on our square, and then we want to type in scale. All right, so at this point, for a tool like scale, our base point is really important. Like what we select as our base point is really important. So looking at this finished product, we're basically scaling everything up from this point here, right? So this point is staying stationary while everything else is getting bigger, all right? So that's how you can determine what your base point is what point do I want everything to grow from? Okay, so for example, if I were to do a base point in the very center here, we would have a rectangle around and then around again, okay? So it would look like loops or rings around the central point here, okay? So base point, just think of that as where is this going to expand or grow from? What's the point where it's going to start expanding from, okay? So that means we want this point to be our base point, so we're going to select that. And now here, you can see in the command line, it's asking us to either specify a scale factor, or we have these two options here. We have copy and we have reference. Regardless of what we choose here, we want to click on copy so that it maintains the original square. All right, we want to keep that there. So I'm going to click on copy. And now it's asking me again, scale factor or reference. Okay, so if you look down here in the directions, I don't care which option you use because they're both important in their own way. All right, I'm going to show you a good example of scale by reference later on when we cover the practical assignment. So if you want to use the scale factor for this, or if you want to use the reference, either one's totally fine. Or you could even do one of each. So maybe for the first one, you do a scale factor, and then for the second one, you do a scale by reference so that you get experience using both methods. All right, but if you do the scale factor, I give you the factors here in the instructions that you use to achieve these sizes. Okay, so for the first one, you want to use a scale factor of 2, and all that means is I'm doubling the width and the height of my original shape. Okay, so 2 is doubling, 3 obviously is tripling, so this would be tripling 1, 2, 3. I'm tripling that there. Okay, so that's all scale factor means. So if I were to just type 2 for my scale factor and hit enter, you can see what happens. It perfectly scales that up to those lines there. All right. Now I'm going to delete that, and then I'm going to show you the scale by reference. Okay, scale by reference. We're going to click on that again, and we're going to type in scale just like we did before. Our base point stays the same. Now instead, I'm going to click on copy to keep that, and then I'm going to click on reference. All right. So what reference does is it lets us establish a length and then scale from the second point. All right. So basically, I'm going to choose my base point again. Then I'm going to choose this point out here, and now I can drag this point essentially wherever I want it, and it's going to scale it that way. So first base point, second point is the point I want to scale from, so that will be this point. And now I start dragging, and you can see what happens as I drag. It just dynamically scales to wherever I click. So if I were to click this one, it would make the square there at the first dashed line segment. Or if I go all the way out here, it's going to do it there. So then you just click again and it scales it there. All right, so that's really easy to do, and I honestly use scale by reference pretty much all the time exclusively because it's so easy to just dial in the exact scale that you want. Okay, so that's what I personally recommend, but if something works better for you, like the scale factor, that's totally fine, whatever works for you. All right, going on to the mirror exercise. This one is super obvious and easy to do. We're just going to mirror these shapes over the dashed line, okay? I have done the instructions here that I want you to preserve the original shapes, okay? So that means make sure that you keep a copy of the original as well as the duplicate, all right? So we're just going to do a couple of these. We're just going to click on this first one here, type in mirror. Okay, now it's asking us to specify the first point of our mirror line. So anytime we want to do our mirror line, we just want to select these endpoints on the mirror, or the mirror line that's already there. Okay, and something to note, it's very important to make sure you have your endpoint snaps turned on. So our O snaps are this little icon right here. Looks like a square with a smaller square in the top left corner. You want to click on that and then make sure you have your endpoint snaps turned on, all right? Or optionally, if you have your ortho mode turned on, you don't really have to worry about being precise with your second click. So for example, if I turn on ortho and I select my first point, I just have to drag straight up and lock it to that 90 degrees, okay? As long as I'm locked to 90 degrees, you can see what happens. If I lock it this way, it's going to mirror down that way. If I just drag straight up or down, it's going to mirror across where I want it, and I just have to click again. I don't really have to be precise and make sure I click this, okay? So that makes things just a little bit faster. All right, so if I drag up here and I click on that, you can see that it copies it, but now the command isn't over. You need to remember this. A lot of times people get confused and they think that the command is done and they start doing something else. But really, you're not finished with the command until you look down here and tell AutoCAD whether or not you want to erase the source objects. All right? We want to preserve the original shapes, so I'm going to click on No, and that's going to keep the original rectangle intact. All right, just do one more here. Like I said in the first week lecture, if you hit Enter on your keyboard, that's going to automatically repeat the last command that you did, okay? So here again, I'm going to click on my first point, drag up, click again, and then I'm going to say, no, I don't want to erase the source objects. This right here is the default option. That's what it's currently set to, and it's going to retain whatever you did last. So if I said no last, it's going to keep that. And I don't even have to click on this. I can just hit Enter, okay? And it's going to just do that by default, all right? All right, so next we have our rotate exercise. So I'm just going to do one of these and show you the process for just doing one, because it's going to be the exact same for all of them. The only difference is you're going to be rotating by a different degree for each one, okay? So starting off, we need to establish our base point that we're going to be rotating by. So in this example, as opposed to the scale example, we want to rotate from the center, the very center of this object, okay? Now, I'm going to show you a really easy way to do that. If you look here, the object is broken apart into separate segments, all right? If the object was totally connected and joined together, we could use a particular object snap called geometric center, all right? So if I were to really quick join these together using the join command, you can see the problem with the join command is it will make all the lines the same attribute, okay, so we lose our green line. So that's why we're not going to use it for this exercise. But if I were now to rotate, you can see that I get this little snap right here in the middle. And AutoCAD just knows that that is the geometric center, and I can then rotate it from the middle, okay? So you can see here, if I specify my degree being 45 and enter, it rotates it based on that center point. Now, since we don't want to join these together, we're going to have to use something, a little bit of a different technique, okay? And this is where polar tracking comes in. So one of your LinkedIn Learning videos that you watched covered polar tracking and explained it. Super important. You're going to use polar tracking a lot because it's super helpful for doing stuff like this. All right, polar tracking is, oh, I'm sorry, not polar tracking. Snapping reference lines. That's what we want. We want snapping reference lines. All right, that is this little icon down here next to your object snaps. All right, you want to make sure that is turned on. So if we have that turned on and we highlight our object that we want to rotate, if I click on my rotate, what I want to do now is I want to basically highlight 2 points on the object, and then we're going to be basically drawing imaginary lines between them to find the very center point of this object. So when I have this option turned on, as I hover over this and then start dragging down, you can see that green line that's dashed that appears on my screen. All right. Now, if I start moving my mouse over toward one of these points over here, you can see if you look at my first point, how it has that small green crosshair that's still there. That means that AutoCAD is remembering that point for me. It knows that I'm wanting to use that point in some way to do something. All right. So now I hover over this point here, and once I hover over that and I start dragging back toward the center, you can see I get that dashed line again going horizontally. As I find the center point between those two, you can see now what happens. AutoCAD preserved in memory the first point I hovered over, and it took the second point that I hovered over, and now it finds the exact middle intersection between those 2 points with imaginary lines that are running through. Okay, now as long as I'm close enough to that middle point, you can see I can move my cursor and that little X stays locked onto the very center of that object. All right, that's exactly what I want. So now if I click, I have the perfect middle of this object and I can rotate around. Okay, now you can see that it's jumping around perfect 90 degrees and only making that green line move around. And that's because I have my ortho mode turned on and that's locked to 90-degree increments, okay? One way we can get around this is by just typing 45 right now. So if I just type in 45 and hit enter, it's going to do a 45-degree angle and it's going to do what I want, all right? Now the line is upside down, so we'd have to rotate again or rotate it to the right instead of the left. But if I undo this, I'm going to show you another technique that you can use. All right, so if I highlight this again, this is where polar tracking comes in. So this is where polar tracking is important. If we turn this on and then we set our degrees to this option here, 45, 90, 135, 180, you'll see what will happen. So now I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to use my rotate command. I'm going to establish the middle of that object by hovering over this, dragging my mouse over here to this one. All right, hovering over here, dragging my mouse to this one, and then dragging toward the center. Okay, there's the middle of my object. Clicking, and now, since I have that polar tracking turned on, it's going to lock me to 45-degree increments. All right, so now I have perfect control over exactly where that green line goes, and all I have to do when I get it to where I want it to be is click. All right, so now I'm just going to click, and I did exactly what I wanted. The green line's now at the bottom, and it was really easy just using that polar tracking option. Okay, so make sure you use that because it's very, very helpful. Let me undo that really quick. Make sure there's no more options we want to go over here. So again, establishing base point. Sometimes it can be a little bit finicky, so you might need to hover over these points a little bit longer. Just go back over them. You just want to make sure you have those green, like basically plus signs that are appearing. All right, then you know that it's going to work the way you want it to. All right, there we go. So click again, and just like the other modify tools, you have a copy option if you want to keep the original while still rotating it, or we can do the reference mode. All right, so the reference, we're going to establish our base point one more time. And then what this lets us do is pick a point that we're going to rotate based on, okay? So you could pick the midpoint of this green line here, and then drag that straight down. And then that's going to do the same thing. All right, so using reference modes are really, really useful, and that's how I prefer to do it. Like I said, with the scale command, it just gives you a greater level of control whenever you're modifying these objects, all right? But you can do whatever you want. Okay, extend. Using the extend command, extend the green lines to the red lines. Okay? So what we want to do here is use extend and make all these green lines intersect at the corners of these red lines. Okay? So if I type in extend, if you remember from last week, the first thing we want to do when we're using either extend or trim is establish our fence line. Okay, so our fence is the line that's either going to be our boundary for extension or trimming. Okay, so in this case, if I want to extend this green line segment to this corner, I would want to establish this red line as my fence line, so that's going to be my first click. All right. Once you do that, you want to hit enter to confirm. And now you want to hover over the endpoint of your green line. Okay, and as I hover over that, you can see it's going to jump and extend there. So if I click on it, you can see it confirms and it does it. Now this command is going to just keep running until you either hit enter or escape. Okay, so if you wanted multiple to go to that line, you would hover over those and you would click, and as many as you want are going to extend all the way to that line. Okay, but I'm going to hit escape. Then I'm going to hit enter to restart the command. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. All right, I'm going to click once, hit enter to confirm, hover over this, and then click, and then hit escape to close out of the command. All right. Now for this side, I'm going to show you something a little bit different, something that we went over in week 1, but some of you may have forgotten. You can accomplish the same thing by using either chamfer or fillet and setting your radius or your segment length to 0. Okay, so if I type in fillet and hit enter, I want to go to my radius option, and you can see mine's already set to 0, but if you go to radius and then just hit 0, enter to make sure that is set to 0, then all you have to do is select the 2 lines you want to intersect. So I'm going to click on this one, I'm going to click on this one, and as I click on my second one, you can see it's going to accomplish the exact same thing. Right? Click here and click here. It does the exact same thing. All right. So that's it for extend. For trim, we are going to basically do the same thing, except we're chopping off the extra bits that we don't want. All right. But just like extend, it's the same process. we need to establish our fence line, and then once we do that, we select the pieces we want to cut off. So I'm going to type in trim, hit enter. I'm going to select my fence and hit enter, and then click on the line segment I want to get rid of. And you can see we get a little preview here, and the X just means that's what's going to be deleted. So I click again and it goes away. If you want to do this really quickly, what I personally like to do is highlight every single line, type in trim, and now anything that I click on that's overlapping can be erased. But since everything is selected, basically it's acting like every single line is a fence. Okay, so you could get things like this where it's only going to trim out this little piece here and it's going to leave this piece on the end. So in cases like this, you want to delete this line first and then delete this line. But this allows you to really quickly go around and clean up all these lines without having to exit the command and restart the command, okay? It's just really simple to just go around and click on all the pieces you don't want. And you could even make selection windows like this and do multiple at one time. So now if I make a selection window and I go over this and then release, it's just going to cut those two pieces off at once. It's not going to work doing a blue selection region. Actually, I don't even know if it'll let you. Yeah, it won't let you even do it. You want to make this green selection window, and you just want to hover over the two that you want to get rid of, and then click, and then it's gonna do it for all of them. Okay. So that should be pretty easy. Next, we're going to use offset, and we're going to basically act like this is the boundary of a floor plan. So these are going to become walls, okay? And using offset, we're going to be giving the walls some thickness. So what we want to do is use the offset command to offset the walls of the plan 6 inches outward, all right? And then using the fillet command, clean up any intersections on the new lines, okay? So with this, I'm going to highlight all my lines, okay? Click again to confirm. Then we're going to be using the offset command. That's this little button here, or you can just type in offset and hit enter. And now we want to specify the offset distance. That's going to be 6 inches. All right. Oh, okay. So actually, since this is not all joined together, you would have to use offset individually for each line. So if I go like this, you can see it's doing them individually. And now it's telling us use the fillet command to clean up the intersections of these new lines. So just like before, if I use fillet, I can go around and individually clean up these intersections, okay? The better way to do this, which that's a good way to learn, but the better way to do this would be to highlight all this and then type in join to make it all one object. Okay, so you can see 10 objects converted to one polyline. Then click on it and click offset. All right, and this is going to offset it all at the same time. Okay, and you can see I get a little preview of what that's going to do. If I go inward, it's going to offset everything inward. If I go outward, it's going to do it all outward. And then I just have to click again to confirm, and it's going to do that. All right, lastly, we have this polyline exercise. So last week we went over the difference between lines and polylines. Basically, lines are just individual segments, and they don't all act as a single unit when you select them, okay? So if I were to click on it, and even though that they're intersecting perfectly at corners, you can select each segment individually. All right, for example, you can see how these are just individual line segments, whereas this is a joined polyline, okay? I just click on one and the whole thing highlights. So we're going to be using the pedit command to edit these polylines and do different things. Okay, so for the first one, convert the line above to a polyline. So if I click on it first, and I type pedit and hit enter, it asks me, the object that I selected is not a polyline, do I want to turn it into one? The default option is Y for yes, so I'm going to hit enter. If yours says no, or it's an N, just type in Y and hit enter, and that's going to do it. So that converts it. Now that's converted, I'm going to back out. So now I'm going to go on to the next one. Change the width of the polyline above to 6 inches. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to click on the polyline here, run the pedit command on it, and now here we want to select an option. So we want width. All right. So I'm going to click on width. Specify a new width for all segments. This is where I type in 6 inches and hit enter, and you can see now that it is 6 inches wide. All right. The next one is the same thing, except we're taking the width from 6 inches and we're setting it down to 0. All right. Same thing with 0, enter, same thing. All right. This one, explode the polyline above. What I want to do for this is highlight it, and then I want to type in explode. Okay. And now when I did that, it lost any of the overrides that I had on it. So it was 6 inches thick, but now it's just a regular old line. All right. Last, these two. We're going to join all these white lines together to convert the yellow polyline. So we just want to highlight all this, type in join, hit enter, and you can see now that everything is yellow because it's all joined together. And then the final one is to change the width of the polyline above to 6 inches. That's the exact same as this, so just click on it, run the pedit command, change the width to 6 inches. Using these widths, we honestly don't use them all that much within our drawings. We might use it for just graphical purposes, but when we're actually drawing floor plans, we're not going to be drawing a single line and then using the pedit command to give an individual line some thickness. We're going to be drawing just like I did over here and making an additional set of lines either inside or outside. And this is how our walls are going to be, okay? And the reason for that is because when you do it like this, you just don't have as much control when it comes to dimensioning things. All right, that's why we do it individually, so we can get all of these corner points here. All right, so that's it for the week 2 lab exercise. Make sure that you do all of these, zoom in on all of them, use the snipping tool, get a reasonable image of what you did. And that's going to be 8 individual images, and then you're going to upload those to the questions on the Lab 2 assignment. All right?